Welcome back to another video on building your own version of Uber with Adalo. Now, in the previous few videos, we've taken a slightly unconventional approach. We started with the UI and UX, we then laid out the database, and then we looked at APIs and integrations, which is usually what I would leave to last. However, we've now got to the point where we're all set up and ready to build out the workflow for our core piece of functionality. And so we're going to do just that. And if you remember, the user is going to put in their current location and their new address. Based on that, we're going to figure out how long it will take to actually do the ride in the first place. That's then going to take them to this screen where we'll show them an estimated pickup time and the estimated drop-off time. And of course, we'll take a payment. We'll be able to then look for a driver, which will then ping some information over to the driver app, and then so on and so forth through the ride until we get to the point where we're making a rating. And there's a little bit of a reminder on the original flowchart of where we are. In the last video, we essentially did the distance API check to find out how long the trip will take. The bit that we haven't done yet is turn that into an actual time. So we know, for example, the trip will take roughly 19-20 minutes, but you know, how do we figure out the exact time? How do we tell it that right now that would be the trip would take roughly up until 10 to 12, for example. We then need to carry out this part here, so showing the user the map, the pickup, letting them pay, and then building in the refresh as well. Now it's going to feel slightly odd because we're kind of building half an experience here, because obviously half of this is driven by the driver's app. For example, we can't really calculate the pickup time until we figure out the where the driver is, but we can figure out the estimated drop-off time, and we can take a rough guess and say, okay, we're going to guess that the pickup time for any pickup is roughly 10 minutes. So that's where we're going to start, and I'm going to quickly remind you of something I said right at the very start of the Intro to No Code Fundamental videos, which was no code is absolutely non-technical, it's absolutely a visual interface, and it's absolutely easy and accessible. But it is fundamentally software under the hood, and sometimes you've got to do kind of software-y, techy things. So we're going to be doing a wee bit of math in here, and you've got two choices. You can either follow along and try to understand the math, or feel free to just pause the video and type in whatever I do and just copy it. Both are totally fine. It's not the simplest thing in the world, and I'm not going to pretend I completely understand it. I did not do well in math at school. And so I'll show you what I'm trying to do here, and then I'll show you some information around about it as well. So as a quick catch me up to where we were, we've created a ride. We've put all the address information in from the pickup and the drop off. We've also set all of these Boolean variables, or these true, false, yes, no fields to false. And we've grabbed our distance data based on the pickup address and destination that we just created here in the new ride. We're now going to hit update, so we're going to update a ride, and let me just show you that again from scratch. We're going to add another action, going to go to update, hit new ride. New ride of course refers to the one that we've just created. And so we're not going to change any details we just put in, of course, but we are going to change some things related to drop-off time, pickup time, all this kind of stuff here. So let's start with an easy one, the drop-off time in seconds. Well, technically, we already know when the drop-off would be because we've got our duration here. So you could pop that in there, and of course we know distance as well. So we can put that in there, but let's look at something more complicated with a bit of math. Let's calculate the fare, or the price for the ride. I'm going to show you how to do this. And essentially what I'm going to do, there's multiple different ways you could charge a fare, but what I'm going to do is essentially put a charge on the number of minutes. So if it's 10 minutes, that will be times by or multiplied by a charge. So if it was £1 a minute, then it would be £10. If it was 20 minutes, £1 a minute, it would be £20, so on and so forth. So let me show you how that's going to work. I'm going to come in here, and I'm going to grab that duration again. Now the duration is given in seconds, so a couple of things to note here that will be useful as we go through. First of all, clearly there are 60 seconds in a minute, so if you want 10 minutes you're going to have 600 seconds. I arrive at that by saying, well, 10 minutes is 60 60 times 10, so 60 seconds times 10, 600 seconds refers to 10 minutes. So just to give you an idea, at the same time, every day has 1,440 minutes in it. So 1,440 minutes in a day. We'll come back to that figure in just a few minutes. But just a couple of things worth keeping in mind, because we are kind of messing around with like seconds, minutes and stuff like that here. So what we're going to do is we're going to calculate the fare. And what we can do here is we can essentially, if we've got this in seconds, we can hit the divide key, which is a slash. That'll put up the little divide symbol, and we can divide that by 60. And so if that's roughly 20 minutes, let's say, which I think it was when we did the Integromat calculation, because we're dividing that by 60, that is going to then turn that into minutes for us. So that's going to look like something like, if it's 20 minutes, say it's going to be roughly 1,160 odd seconds. If we divide that by 60, and don't worry about doing it in your head, but if we kind of come into Google and we type, right, okay, what is 160? I think it was 162. Divide that by 60, what does it look like? And that gives us 19, so that's roughly about 19 minutes. And again, don't worry if you're not following along. Just at the end, I'll try and put a timestamp in for it, but I'll just say, look, pause the video and write it down. But I've used this little thing here called a bracket, because I don't know if you remember this, and it might have a different name, but when I was at school, I learned this thing called BODMAS. It was like BODMAS, and it basically was about the order in which math is done. And so what we mean by that is, if I put something in a bracket, it gets calculated together. Let me show you what I mean. So let me take these brackets out. So if I'm going to say, let's say I want to charge 30 pence a mile, then what I have to do is type 0.3. If I want to do a pound a mile, it would be times 1. But if I want to do pence, or I guess in US dollars, that would be cents, then it's 0. Because it's 30 pence, so there's no, so if I did this, it wouldn't quite give me the right number, because it would essentially miscalculate this. It would try and do like, what is 1,162, which is our duration. What is the duration divided by whatever 60 times 0.30 is? So it would come out a little bit wrong. Now, depending on the math calculation, it could work, but I don't like to leave it up to chance. So what I can do is I can put this side of the equation into brackets, and essentially what I'm saying is calculate the duration divided by 60. So do that first, get that number, whatever that number is, which looks like it is 19.36666, forever onwards. So do this sum first, and then once you've got that number, so once you've got that 19, times that by 0.30. And again, it's a variable there, so I can't quite show you, but if I show you in Google what that math looks like, and you can always use a little star symbol to indicate multiplication. In Google, if I do that, then that's going to give me 5.81, which is perfect. That means the fare for this ride is going to be £5.81. For a 20-minute taxi ride, that sounds about right to me. Now, it might be a little bit low. I could change that to 60, and that would more or less double the price, for example. And as I say, if you take out the brackets, sometimes this stuff still works, but not always, So it's worth using the brackets just to kind of section it up in your head, but yeah, the sum will still work. So we've just calculated our fare there, and when we display that later on, we can then use that as a currency or whatever. But there's a slightly more complicated bit of math we need to do, and you're probably groaning at that. You're probably thinking, Jesus, that was already quite a lot. What could we possibly have in store here? And so we're going to essentially figure out the estimated drop-off time and the estimated pick-up time. Now, one of the things that we're going to do, so at the minute, we know where the user is going, we know where they are, and we know where they're going, so we can figure out the distance based on that. What we don't know is how long it's going to take the user to get picked up in the first place. We don't, because we don't know where the driver is. The driver could be 2 minutes away, or it could be 10 minutes away. We are not going to be able to calculate that until we get to the await and pickup screen. And so what we're going to have to do is make a guess. So I'm going to make a guess in terms of seconds of how long I think it's going to take for the pickup time to be. I'm just going to guess that's 10 minutes on average. You know, this is just a default. If we don't know who the driver is, what's the default? I'm going to guess it's 10 minutes. You could build a more sophisticated system here. You know, for example, you could go and use Integromat to look at every driver who's currently available, figure out how far away they are, and as a result, figure out the pickup time from the get-go. But that's a little bit complicated. That's probably another 2 hours of videos on its own. So we're just going to do this. I'm going to type 600. Again, that is 60 seconds times 10 for 10 minutes. So 60 seconds times 10 minutes gets me 600, and that's the pickup time in seconds. That's 10 minutes expressed in seconds. And so the other thing that I need to do here is figure out the estimated drop-off time. And here's how I'm going to do that. First of all, I'm going to get the current time, because we're not trying to figure out how long is it going to be. We're going to say what's the exact time. So I need to get the current time here. I then need to start doing some math. Now, let me explain how adding one time to another works. How do you add seconds onto a time? How does that work? The first thing to say is it's very, very different in every no-code tool. There's a little thread I found over here on the Adalo help forums that kind of explained it. And this is a part, by the way, I absolutely understand if you would rather just pause and write in what I'm going to write in a few seconds, because this took me a little while to get my head around as well. But essentially, if you and I think about a date, we're going to have a date like this. It's going to be, you know, month, day, year, and time. So we're going to have, right, okay, that is the 18th of June 2020 at 10:44 a.m. And so if we added seconds to that, you would imagine that's going to add on X number of minutes, and that will move the time on from there. Actually, what happens is, Adalo, when you're doing a formula, which is what we're doing, which is when you do math essentially to create or you know, mess with numbers and times, what Adalo is doing is it is essentially calculating the number of days since the 1st of January 1970 and then expressing that as a number. Let me explain a couple of things there. 1970, the 1st of the 1st, is generally when all computers start their dates. I think it's because computers were roughly invented around about 1970, and therefore that is almost always the default date that a computer will start at. You'll see that in a lot of no-code tools. If you go back as far as you can, the first date is usually the 1st of the 1st, 1970. So what Adalo is basically doing is figuring out via this number, and I'm not 100% sure how it's calculating it. I'm not sure if it's a number of days, number of minutes. It's probably days, I would think, given it's about 18,000. So I think it's calculating the number of days. And so essentially what the person's saying here is, if you want to add one day, right, if you wanted to say, okay, let's add one day to that decimal, then you would simply add number 1. And that would say, okay, if the current date is 18,431 and you add 1 to make it 18,432, well, that now represents tomorrow. A little bit confusing, but essentially what we're saying is, if you want to add a day, you simply do a +1. Now that's great if you want to add a day, but if you want to add a minute, which we do, because we are, you know, just to remind you, we're trying to figure out the drop-off time. So I'm trying to say, okay, I know it's going to take me 20 minutes to get to the destination. I know it's going to take me 10 minutes to get picked up, so that's 30 minutes all in. So what time is that actually going to be? Well, that's going to be 30 minutes from now. So what I'm trying to figure out is, how do I tell Adalo that the real time the user is going to get picked up, if I was looking at my own clock, is going to be about 10 past 12, because that's 30 minutes from now. That's what we're trying to figure out. Again, pretty confusing, so feel free to skip on and just write down what I wrote in a couple of minutes. But because a day is +1, if we want to add on minutes, then we kind of have to figure out how many minutes do we want to add on, and we do that by basically putting in the number of minutes and then dividing it by 1,440. The reason for that is there are 1,440 minutes in a day, and so therefore one day is 1,440 minutes. So if you want to add on X number of minutes, you have to figure out which fraction of 1,440 is that. You know, for 20 minutes, like, what fraction out of the 1,440 minutes is that? Is it, you know, 5% of those minutes? Is it 10%? We don't know. Now, rather than having to worry about percentages and all that kind of thing, thankfully the user here has provided a nice little formula for us to figure out. So if we want to add days, we do +1. If we want to add a certain number of minutes, then what we do is we do plus, we open a bracket, and we do the number of minutes, which is our duration, divided by 1440. So that's what we've got to do. We've got to basically figure out how many minutes do we want, and then do it divided by 1440. But we've got a slight complication there, which is we've got seconds rather than minutes. So we're going to have to add something else on. Let me show you how we do that. So if I go to estimated drop-off time, we've got the current time. And if I simply do a plus, and then I'm going to open a bracket because I want to calculate this all together, I'm going to grab my duration. I'm going to hit the divide key, which is just a slash. A slash like that one up there. I'm going to hit slash, and I'm going to type divided by 1140, and I'm going to close bracket. So that's doing the right fraction based on what this poster said here. If you want to add a minute, then do that. But the problem is, we know this is in seconds, so technically I've just added like 1,100 and something minutes. So I've just added a few hours. So if I was to go and look at the drop-off time right now, it's going to say, oh, you'll get dropped off in like, I don't know, 12 hours or 20 hours or something ridiculous like that. I recommend doing it for comic value, by the way. But what I now need to do is actually take that a step further. If I know I've just added seconds rather than minutes, how can I convert that into minutes rather than seconds? Well, I can do it by dividing by 60. So if I just do divide by 60, just like that, and again I can put that in a bracket, I can close my bracket there, and then put another bracket right behind that little plus sign. Where's my icon? Sorry, I can put that right behind the plus sign, so I can put another bracket there, and that's a bracket within a bracket. Again, a little bit confusing, but hopefully you can sort of see, that bracket matches that one, and that bracket matches that one, so we've just got two. So essentially what we're saying here is, take the seconds, divide that by 1440, and then divide that further by 60, and that will give you the number of minutes, because that first equation will turn into X number of seconds, and then by dividing it by 60, we'll then get the right number. And I can show you that in action. So there we go, there's 1162, which we know is our duration. If I divide that by 1140, then I get this random number. What is that? 0.8. I've got no idea. However, if I take that and divide that by 60, then I'm getting a more accurate fraction of the day. Now, I know you still don't know what 0.01 is, but the point is that is 0.01 of the day, which is 20 minutes is likely to be something like that rather than 0.8 of a day. This is just a much smaller amount of the day. And again, I know this is really confusing. I know if you're not a big math person, it's probably pretty daunting. So again, just feel free to skip on a little bit and copy the numbers. But just to give you an idea of exactly how that's working, that there is a fraction of a day that represents 19 minutes. So we've got our estimated drop-off time. The other thing that we could do there if we wanted is add the pick-up time on top of that. And again, that might feel a little bit confusing, but let me show you exactly how that would work. So right now we've basically said the drop-off time is the current time, plus 19 minutes or whatever it might be, depending on the calculation. And by the way, this is 19 minutes between the two addresses that we've got from Integromat. If you put two addresses in there, it could be 20 minutes, it could be 2, it could be 100. So we're just going off this same example. But what I can now do is the same thing. If I want to add another 10 minutes to it, because I want to factor in the pickup time, because I'm not going to drop you off in 20 minutes, I'm going to drop you off in 30 minutes because I need to spend 10 minutes getting to you to pick you up first. So that kind of pickup time is going to be sort of, 10 minutes from now. So what I can do here is I can do a plus. I'm going to open another bracket just to keep my math all nice and sectioned off. And I'm going to type in 600 divided by 1140. And you'll see that it's just similar to how I did the 1162. So I'm just kind of doing the same thing here, even though it looks a little bit scarier. And then again, I'm just going to do divide again by 60. If I put another bracket there, I better put another bracket there as well. So there you go. Essentially what we're saying is current time plus the 20 minutes duration plus the 10 minutes pickup time. That is what we're doing right here. And you could kind of chop and change that. You could put a variable in there if you wanted to use pickup time in seconds, but because we've not saved this yet, the pickup time doesn't exist, so I'm just going to put that like that. In terms of the estimated pickup time then, you can probably guess what this would look like, or you might be sitting there vigorously shaking your head if you're not following the math too well. But for the estimated pickup time, we'll essentially just do current time plus plus 600 divided by 1140 divided by 60. And the reason we've got to that is because we're not using any duration, we're just randomly guessing the estimated pickup time at the minute. We're randomly guessing it's going to be 600. We can update this and we will do that in the driver app, but at the minute we're randomly guessing it's going to be about, I think 600 seconds or 10 minutes as that translates to. So we divide that by 1440 and then divide that by 60 to get the fraction of the day, and we can then add that. So rather than adding 1 day, we're adding something like 0.11 of a day onto the current time. So that's the hard bit over. That's the good news. You've made it. You're through the hard bit. Now what we need to do is just start connecting this stuff up, and we'll go and do a quick tester, because the math can always be wrong, so we'll go and do a quick tester once we've done that as well, and see if we got it right, and hopefully we did. So if I pop on here now to my ride confirmation screen, it's time to fill some of these variables in. So estimated pickup time, excuse me, I just got some mail through the door. The estimated pickup time is going to, of course, come from the current ride. So we've already got that, so we'll just say, well, there's the estimated pickup time there. And you can go and confirm that format. I quite like relative on this page, so I'm going to leave relative. You can then go to the estimated drop-off time. And again, we've already calculated that, so we'll do that. Again, it's set to relative, and there you go. We'll then come into our Stripe, and we'll set the payment amount as the fare that we calculated. So current ride, fare. Again, you can come in here, you can nothing specify, but you can come to the currency type there. I'm going to pick GBP. Again, you can do whatever currency suits you. Charge description, just call this something like Uber ride. Whoops, I've done that in all capitals. Uber ride, there we go. For the email field, it's looking for the buyer's email. So let's just go to the logged in user and hit their email. And then of course for a submit button, there's a couple of things we're going to have to do. So it's going to take us to the await and pick up screen. The other thing that it's going to do is it is going to update the current ride, and it's going to deem that ride as paid. And again, we're going to just make sure the driver is assigned as set to false. And this is going to do an interesting thing, because what we're going to do is we're going to configure it on the driver's side to say any time that a ride shows up and it's confirmed as paid, we can then assign the driver. So it's going to show up in a little list they've got called available rides. Let me just show you. This is a driver app I created earlier, and we're going to build our own, but you can see available rides, and if I look at that, it's a list of rides filtered by as assigned as false. And of course you can also filter that by as paid to be false as well. So you can say as paid, as true, not false. There we go. So that's going to show you a list of all rides where they're not assigned but they're also paid for. So that's what we're going to do on the driver's side, but again, forget that for now, we'll come back to that later. And if I zoom right back down to where I was, then essentially we've just specified pickup time, drop off time and fare. We can go and test that out if we want to just make sure it's working. So let's hit that. Well, maybe we've done a lot here, so we might have forgot something. There might be something not working. So there we go. Hit where to, and it should put our address in. We'll do 28 Banner Street because that's the one I calculated in the first place. So we'll just keep our math right. We'll hit continue. Okay, so we've got a couple of little things that have went wrong here. First of all, obviously the displays kind of showed up a little bit wonky. So let's just fix that. So we'll grab the fare, we'll move that down. I'll tell you exactly what went wrong there. I forgot to switch on Integromat. I'm glad this happened actually, because it lets me show it to you, because this annoyed me for a while before I managed to fix it. I've not switched this on, so I need to switch that on if I want to test with it. I could also hit run once, but because I've not got that on, when Adalo tried to make the API call, it didn't work. So I'm just going to pop into my database, I'll find that ride we just made, which is that one there, and I'm going to delete it, just to keep the testing database all kind of cleared up. And let's try that again and see where we get to. So we've switched Integromat on, and we've also spaced out the writing a little bit. So again, where to? 15 Savile Row over to 28 Banner Street, and remember we set an action up earlier to pull the home address in, but I can correct that if I want. Anyway, I'll hit continue, and Adalo's going to go and make an API call, and here we go. So some interesting stuff going on here. Our estimated drop-off time has worked. It says 29 minutes, that has actually worked. Our fare hasn't shown up, and our estimated pickup time hasn't shown up, so we'll have a quick look into why that is. But for the minute, everything looks like it's broadly working. So let's figure out why the pickup time and the drop-off time didn't work. So sorry, the fare didn't work. So fare's a pretty obvious one. It's because I forgot to put the variable in. If you remember back to the UI and UX video, I did swear that I would forget to put a variable in somewhere. So we'll put the fare in, and we'll calculate that as a currency. Oops, and I want to set that to USD, GBP rather than USD. There we go, my eyesight was failing me there. And so our pickup time didn't show up. Ride estimated pickup time is set, so let's just quickly check the database. So this is a bit of a debugging process. Let's figure out what went wrong. So if we look at the estimated drop-off time, that is set, but the pickup time is not. So we don't have a pickup time set. So that means when we did our update, something must have went wrong in there. Let's go and find out what. So pop into update, and let's take a little bit of a look. Now presumably something must be wrong with our math, and yep, here's the problem right here. Can you see what I've done wrong? So if you pay attention, I've opened two brackets here, but what we haven't done is take away the extra bracket. So essentially we've opened two, we've closed one, and then we've tried to close another two. So if I simply delete that, that should make things square up a little bit. We've opened two brackets, we've closed one there, we've closed one there, and there we go. So let's go ahead, let's just delete that ride, and let's check this one last time, make sure everything's working, which of course it should be. And if we hit preview, and apologies for that little noise in the background earlier, that was just my door buzzer going. If we hit where to, 28 Banner Street again, hit continue, it's calculating everything, and there we go. So we're estimating that we get picked up in 10 minutes and that we get dropped off in 29 minutes, and of course that's going to carry a fare of 5.81. We've got Stripe set in test mode, so if I go and grab the card information from there, and let's do 0222. Now it'll probably go wrong here because we've not finished the next screen, but essentially that's going to hit payment successful and take me to a waiting pickup. So we've made a ton of progress there. We've just got to a really good place. We're now as far along as this screen here, and let's start making some of the changes that we need to make for this to work. So a quick reminder, when we hit pay now, this is going to update the ride to let the drivers know that it's ready to go, and it's also going to take us to this screen here, and this is where things are going to start to get interesting, because a couple of things happen on this screen. It's going to start out by saying we're looking for the driver, and we're going to set some conditional visibility here. So we're going to say this looking for driver text will only be available if the current ride does not have a driver assigned. So if the driver assigned is false, then we'll change that, or we will show it. Similarly, if the driver's on the way, then we'll change visibility. If the driver's on the way, which we can figure out by saying is the driver assigned true. If the driver's on the way, then this one will hide, this one will appear, and we'll have things going from there. Now what we want to do with the countdown is start that from the estimated pickup time. And well, you can count down, sorry, not from the pickup time, you can count down from the pickup time in seconds. So that's going to count down in minutes and seconds. You can configure various things here if you want. You can set various different actions to happen here. I'm going to leave that blank for now. I'm going to leave the refresh up to the user. And if you remember, we set that up earlier. So when the user hits refresh, it takes them to this page that pings them back. That will then force the app to check if a driver is on the way. But there's something else we need to do here then, because the driver is going to have an option to say that he's picked the user up. So he's going to have a button, let me just show you. He's going to have a nice big button that says when he picks the user up, let us know. So he's going to have this button here. And again, this is just in my demo app. We will rebuild this together. And so what I want to happen is whenever the user refreshes the screen, if the driver has confirmed the pickup, then we need to punt them onto the ride in progress screen. So we're going to go to actions. We're going to say when a user visits this screen, because remember, every time they hit that refresh button, they're going to trigger this because they're going to refresh, then they're coming back to this screen. So as far as Adalo is concerned, the user has just visited the screen over and over again. So what we're going to say here is we want to link to ride in progress, but show advanced, because we only want to do that if the current ride is picked up equals true. Otherwise it won't happen and the user will just stay on this page here. And so what will happen is it will keep counting down and counting down. And of course, when the driver's updated, we can update the pickup time, etc. We can reset the countdown, and that'll all work nicely. So at this point then in the flow, the user would have been picked up, they'll have arrived here, and we'll just change the arrival date. So again, we'll just put the estimated drop-off time, except this time I'm going to change how it displays, and I'm going to say just the time. So it's going to say you should arrive at 2:15, 12:10, whatever the time might be. Similarly with the total fare, again this won't have changed, but we'll just specify it anyway for the looks. We'll put fare, we'll set the currency format, we'll change that of course to GBP, although again it would be whatever you want to make it. And if we hit finish ride, this is going to do a couple of things. It's going to, no, it's not going to refresh the screen, don't want to do that, delete that. It's going to let you rate your ride, and then when the driver hits it, of course, it will mark the ride as complete. So we then get to our rating screen, and again, you can see this is now picked up once we get through that hard part of the workflow. It really is this quick. On the rating screen, what I want to do is show a profile photo, but I want to go to the current ride. I want to grab the driver and show their profile photo. I want to say, how is your ride with, and I'll just put a magic text in there, so a little variable. Again, we'll go to the driver and we'll grab their first name. So it's going to say, how was your ride with John, with Rachel, with Niall, however. Now there's another little thing we need to do here. We're going to set the ability to rate. If you've watched my building something with Airbnb video before, then you'll be familiar with what I'm about to do. But I need users to be able to set a rating, and here's the problem, look. I cannot create a new rating. I need to create a new rating in my database in order to leave it, but I can't currently do it the way this is set up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new variable for the user. And again, I've done this before in Airbnb, but I'm going to create a new variable and I'm going to call that temporary rating variable. And what I'm going to do is, since I can't create a new rating, I'm just going to save that to the current logged in user's temporary rating variable. So that's going to let them pick between 0 and 5 based on the number of stars they select. That'll go to the temporary rating. And then what I'm going to do is when the user hits rate driver and finish, I'm going to do add an action. I'm going to say he will create a new rating. And I'm going to give it a random rating ID. I mean, we could just do rating and then just do the current ride ID, and that will be unique. I'm going to assign that rating, so that rating should apply to the driver. And the rating is simply going to be the logged in user's temporary rating variable. So all I've done is, because I couldn't create a new rating, I've just saved it to the user's database field, and then I've just now created the rating with it. And I'll hit done. And then I can add a nice little action in here just to go to the logged in user. Once it's done that, set their temporary rating variable back to 0, and then link them to the home page, and the ride is done. That's that. Really, really simple. So we've just made our core functionality work, but there's one last bit we need to do before we can move on to the driver app, and that is we need to start showing this stuff in the map, because this is part of the core experience, isn't it? Now, we already copy and pasted our maps over everywhere, but let's just have a look at what we want to show. So on this page, on this map, we're going to want to show the pickup address and the drop-off address. On this one here, we're going to want to show the pickup and then the drop-off. But actually, we're soon going to want to change that to show the pickup and the driver's current address. So once you've got a driver assigned, you want the driver to come towards you. And then finally, on this page, again, we want to go back to pickup to destination. Now, of course, Adalo is limited. We can't draw between them, but we can show the two items on the map. So here's how we're going to do it. If you remember, I explained earlier, oops, sorry, now you know the weather. If you remember, I explained earlier, Google Maps can choose between a single marker or multiple markers. However, if you do multiple markers, it's going to be a list of something. So I'm going to create a new collection, and I'm going to call it addresses. And let me show you how this is going to work. So I'm going to create addresses. And I'm going to give every address an ID number as per. I'm also going to give every address a relationship to a ride, not to a user, to a ride. So a ride can have multiple addresses, but an address can belong to one ride. This is true because a ride might have a pickup address, a drop-off address. We're going to keep them quite generic. And then I'm also going to add the street address. You can probably figure out where this is going. I'm going to add the street address. I am going to add the city address. Excuse me. And I'm going to add the country address. And so that essentially is just going to let us create an unlimited number of addresses assigned to a ride. And so what I can do is this. I've already put the addresses into my ride, and that's the right thing to do. We need that information, but I can add another action and I can hit create an address. So this is when the user first creates a ride over here on the location search screen. I'm going to create an address. I'm going to call this, we'll call it address, again just to generate a unique ID, we'll call it address. We'll call it logged in user. We'll call it exact current time with no formatting. There we go. Always remember when you're using these dates to save what the format is set to. For the ride, of course, we're going to set that to the new ride we've just created on this page. And for the street address, we're going to grab that ride's, we're going to grab the pickup, we're going to grab the city, and of course we're going to grab the country. So this is going to create a new collection item with just this address. Watch this. I'm also going to create another one. So I just did the pickup address, right? But this time I'm going to do the destination address. So again, let's just create address hyphen where's the user's username? Logged in user, sorry. Address hyphen username hyphen current time. And again, this could happen really, really quickly. So since I know I'm creating a second address here, I'm just going to give that a wee hyphen of 2, just in case Adalo created them so quickly at the same time that we ended up duplicating the name. For the ride, I'm going to assign that again to the same ride, but this time, as I say, with the street address, I'm going to grab the drop-off street. I'm going to grab the drop-off city, and I'm going to grab the drop-off country. Now there's something I want you to pay close attention to here. Each of these actions is executed in order, which means the pickup address is going to be created before the drop-off address. The reason I'm pointing that out is because that means if I was to take a list of all the addresses assigned to this ride, the pickup is going to be the oldest and the drop-off is going to be the newest. That will become important a little bit later on. So let's go back to my map. Now that we've set up addresses, we can actually start to bring these in. So my map collection is addresses. I'm going to put a filter on it. This is incredibly important. This is a key bit. If you get this wrong, it'll break. The current ride addresses. I only want to show addresses which pertain to the current ride. I'm going to sort this to show the oldest to the newest. It's not particularly important in this screen, but it gets more important in the other screens. And I'm going to limit the maximum number of items to 2 because right now we've got our pickup address and we've got our drop-off address. But what we're going to do is when the driver is assigned a ride, he is going to specify his own address. He's going to specify his current address, and so we'll end up with 3 addresses related to the ride. We'll have the pickup address of the user, the drop-off address for the user, and the current address for the driver when he is on his way to the pickup. So as a result, we're going to just have those kind of 2 items limited there. And then if I pop into markers, I can specify, well, how do we actually get the address? Again, be very careful here. For the current address, hit street address, press the enter key, not a space, put a city, enter key, country. And that is going to show the map. And of course, we've already got our styles. You could, if you wanted to show exactly the address, you could add an action here that says when the marker's clicked, show some sort of details page that shows exactly where that address is. But you don't have to do that. And so our map will now show the pickup and destination locations right here. Now when we get to await and pickup, it's kind of the same scenario. We need to do multiple markers again, and we need to do addresses again, and we need to do the current ride's addresses, and we need to do a maximum number of 2 items, and of course we need to go and add our addresses in here. It can feel a little bit tedious. You could copy and paste it, but it's probably harder watching me drag and drop it all into place again. So we're just going to specify that there. And so that is going to show up all fine and well, except at some point the driver is going to accept this ride, which means we're going to have his location. The user is going to refresh the screen and the map markers are going to appear again. So we're going to sort this differently, and I want you to think about this one. The last one I sorted from oldest to newest. So if my oldest date is the pickup, my middle date is the drop-off, and then the driver at some point in the future here is going to add their own address because they have accepted the ride. So that's going to become the newest address. So if I filter this so that the 2 that show up are the created date is going to show the 2 newest to oldest. At first it's going to show 2, and there's only going to be 2 addresses related to pickup and the drop-off. But what's going to happen is when the user's pickup comes in, what's going to happen is it's going to show the driver's pickup address, and it's then going to show the middle address, which would be the drop-off address. Now you might be thinking, well, that's not quite right, and that's correct, which is why these orders are so important, because if you take that and drag it over there, now what's happening is the drop-off address is first. So this map is still going to show the same, even though it's set oldest to newest. It's only going to show 2 possible addresses, a pickup and a drop-off. Whereas on this map, it's now going to show the pickup, which we've just switched round, and the driver's pickup. So when the driver's pickup appears, it's going to show. Now that might all sound very, very confusing, and if it is, just try it, play with it yourself, play around between newest and oldest to newest, and I think you'll understand exactly what it is that I am talking about. But now that we've got that, what we want to do is just configure the very last map, and it's almost gone back the way again. So what we're going to do is we're going to show the addresses. Again, we're going to filter by the current ride, but now what we want to do is show the pickup and the drop-off. So we're going to limit it to 2 again, except all we're going to do now is put it back to oldest and newest. We want this map to show up the same way this one did, the original one. The only reason we changed the one in the middle is so we could adapt to show the rider's location, the driver's location when it becomes available as well. And again, let's just finish that off. We've got street address, we've got city address, and we've got country address. Now of course we're not going to be able to test it the whole flow without having the driver app available, because we've just essentially built out everything we need. But obviously, as we've talked about, to get the driver's location we're going to have an app that does that, so on and so forth. And so at this point, let's end the video there. We're going to go on to create our next Uber drivers app, and I'll show you how you can kind of do it a little bit quicker. We're going to run through that. We're going to set that whole thing up, and then you'll have a full working end-to-end Uber app. So jump on to the next video and let's get started.